I said sit on the floor. Flight attendant Linda Kowalski's voice was sharp, cutting through the first-class cabin as she pointed at the carpeted space between the seats. 8-year-old Amara Okonkwo stood frozen in the aisle, her Dora the Explorer backpack sliding off one small shoulder, her boarding pass crumpled in her hand, Seat 2A, first class, paid in full. She wore a purple dress with white flowers, her hair in neat cornrows with colorful beads at the ends that clicked softly when she moved. But my daddy bought me a seat, she whispered, her voice so small it barely carried. Linda's face twisted with disgust. I don't care what your daddy bought. This is first class, sweetie. It's for paying customers, not children flying alone on charity tickets. Now sit down on that floor before I have security remove you from this aircraft. What Linda Kowalski didn't know, what her racist, entitled brain couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the man currently sitting in the Lagos airport lounge, watching his daughter's flight status and making business calls, was Chukwudi Okonkwo, billionaire, philanthropist, and as of 6 months ago, the majority shareholder of Apex Global Airlines, the very airline whose employee was currently forcing his baby girl to sit on the floor like a dog. Let's rewind 12 hours, because understanding how an 8-year-old ended up flying internationally alone requires context. Amara Okonkwo was born in London to Nigerian parents who'd built an empire from absolutely nothing. Her father Chukwudi had started with a small software company in Lagos and turned it into a global tech conglomerate worth billions. Her mother, Grace, was a surgeon who'd given up her practice to run the family's charitable foundation. Amara was their only child, a miracle baby, as Grace had almost died giving birth to her. From the moment she took her first breath, that little girl was the center of their universe. But being the center of a billionaire's universe doesn't mean what people think it means. Chukwudi and Grace didn't raise Amara to be spoiled. They raised her to be kind. To understand that money was a tool, not an identity. To say please and thank you to everyone, regardless of who they were. To treat the security guard with the same respect as a CEO. 8-year-old Amara had never acted entitled in her life. She shared her toys. She wrote thank you notes in careful, wobbly handwriting. She saved her allowance to donate to animal shelters. She was, by all accounts, a genuinely sweet kid who just happened to have a ridiculously wealthy father. The trip had been planned for months. Amara was enrolled in a prestigious international school in Switzerland, not because her parents were trying to show off, but because the school specialized in programs for gifted children, and Amara, despite her young age, was reading at a high school level and doing mathematics that made her tutors blink in confusion. Grace was supposed to fly with her. But 2 days before the trip, Grace's father, Amara's grandfather, had a stroke in Lagos. Grace had to stay. The choice was either cancel Amara's trip, which would mean missing the first 2 weeks of term, or let her fly with the airline's unaccompanied minor service. Chukwudi had been hesitant. 8 felt too young. But Grace reminded him that they'd raised an independent, smart little girl. That the airline had protocols. That she'd be met at every connection by airline staff and delivered directly to the school's representative in Zurich. She'll be fine, Grace had said, kissing Amara's forehead at the airport. You're my brave girl, aren't you? Amara had nodded, trying not to cry, trying to be brave like Mommy said. The first leg, Lagos to London, had been perfect. The flight attendants had been sweet, bringing her extra cookies, letting her peek into the cockpit, making sure she was comfortable. When they landed at Heathrow, a cheerful airline employee named Susan had met her at the gate, holding a sign with her name, and walked her to the connection gate for the London to Zurich flight. That's where everything went wrong. Linda Kowalski was 53 years old and had been a flight attendant for 27 years. She'd started the job young and hopeful, dreaming of adventure and glamorous destinations. What she'd gotten instead was back pain, rude passengers, and a deep, festering resentment toward anyone she perceived as having it easier than her. She was divorced, twice. Her kids barely called. Her apartment was small and depressing. And every day she put on her uniform and smiled at people who treated her like a servant, she felt a little piece of her soul die. Linda had developed a particular hatred for first-class passengers. In her mind, they were all the same, entitled, demanding, looking down on her. She knew it was irrational. She knew she was being unfair. But 27 years of swallowing her pride had turned into something ugly and bitter that she couldn't quite control anymore. When she saw Amara Okonkwo's name on the passenger manifest, unaccompanied minor, first class, seat 2A, something in Linda's brain short-circuited. An 8-year-old. In first class. Flying alone. Her immediate thought was, drug money. Or some kind of charity case. Or a scholarship kid whose parents were gaming the system somehow. Because in Linda's warped worldview, black children didn't fly first class unless something was wrong. She didn't think of it as racism. She thought of it as experience. Pattern recognition. Being realistic about the world. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. Amara boarded the plane holding Susan's hand, her Dora backpack bouncing against her small shoulders. Susan had been lovely, patient, and kind, making sure Amara had her passport, her documents, her emergency contacts all safely tucked into the special lanyard around her neck. Now you're in seat 2A, Susan said, walking her down the jetway. That's first class, right up front. The flight attendants know you're an unaccompanied minor, so they'll take extra special care of you, okay? Amara nodded, her beads clicking. She was trying so hard to be brave, but inside she was scared. She missed her mom. She missed her dad. She wanted to go home. But she was also excited. Switzerland. Cool. New friends. She clutched the stuffed lion her father had given her. So you remember to be brave like Simba, he'd said, and walked onto the plane. Linda was standing at the entrance to first class, her smile automatic and fake. When she saw Amara, that smile flickered. Hi, Amara said politely, holding up her boarding pass like Susan had taught her. I'm in seat 2A. Linda looked at the boarding pass, then at Amara, then back at the boarding pass. Her expression went cold. Is this some kind of joke? She muttered. I'm sorry. Susan, still standing behind Amara, looked confused. Linda's voice got louder. This child has a first-class ticket. Yes, she's an unaccompanied minor. It's all in the system. Her parents prepaid for. I don't care what her parents prepaid for. This is first class. Susan's professional smile was straining. Ma'am, I understand, but the ticket is valid. She's supposed to be in seat 2A. It's all been arranged. Well, it's going to need to be unarranged. We don't have space for her up here. Amara felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. The nice lady was using that voice. The voice adults used when they were mad but trying to pretend they weren't. There's clearly space, Susan said, her tone sharpening. The seat is right there. Empty. Company policy states that unaccompanied minors should be seated in economy where they can be better monitored. That's not company policy. I work for this airline. I've escorted dozens of unaccompanied minors in first class. Linda's face flushed red. Are you questioning my authority on my aircraft? I'm questioning why you're refusing to seat a child who has a valid ticket. The other first-class passengers were starting to stare. A businessman in 3B lowered his newspaper. A woman in 1C took off her headphones. The tension was thick enough to cut. Linda looked down at Amara, and the disgust in her eyes was so naked, so obvious, that even an 8-year-old could see it. Fine, Linda said coldly. She can stay on the plane. But not in first class. She can sit on the floor in the galley where she won't disturb my actual passengers. The cabin went silent. Susan's mouth fell open. Excuse me? You heard me. I'm not wasting a first-class seat on this. She can sit on the floor, or she can get off the plane. Those are her options. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand why the lady was being so mean. She'd said please. She'd been polite. What had she done wrong? You can't make a child sit on the floor, Susan said, her voice shaking with anger. That's insane. That's abuse. It's my aircraft and I'll run it however I see fit. Now either get this child situated on the floor, or I'm calling security to remove both of you. Susan pulled out her phone. I'm calling my supervisor. You do that. In the meantime, everyone's waiting to board, and you're blocking the aisle. And that's when Amara, this tiny 8-year-old girl in her purple flower dress, did something that broke Susan's heart. She sat down. Right there on the floor between seats 2A and 2B, her Dora backpack still on, her stuffed lion clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay," Amara whispered, her voice hitching. "I don't want to make trouble. I'll sit here." "It's okay." It was not fucking okay. Susan was on her phone immediately, her voice low and furious as she spoke to her supervisor. The other passengers were starting to react. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry, a few were filming on their phones. Linda retreated to the galley, her hands shaking. She knew she'd gone too far. She knew it the second the words left her mouth. But she couldn't back down now. Not in front of everyone. That would be admitting she was wrong, and Linda Kowalski hadn't admitted she was wrong in 2 decades. Her colleague Martin, a sweet guy in his 30s who genuinely loved his job, came into the galley looking horrified. "Linda, what the hell are you doing? That's a child. On the floor. She doesn't belong in first class. She has a ticket for first class. I don't care. Something's not right about this. An 8-year-old flying alone in first class? Please. It's probably stolen miles or a clerical error or she has wealthy parents who bought her a ticket. Jesus Christ, Linda, do you hear yourself? Don't you start with me. I've been doing this job since before you were born. Yeah, and clearly you've been doing it wrong." Linda's face went purple. "Get out of my galley." Martin looked at her with something close to pity, then walked back into the cabin. He knelt down next to Amara, who was sitting very still, very quiet, tears making tracks down her cheeks. "Hey, sweetie," he said gently. "What's your name?" "Amara," she whispered. "Amara, that's a beautiful name. Listen, I'm going to get this sorted out, okay? You're not going to sit on the floor. I promise. I don't want to cause problems." Martin's heart broke. "You're not causing problems, honey. The only problem here is that lady being mean, and we're going to fix it." He stood up, pulled out his own phone and made a call. Not to his supervisor. To someone higher up. Someone who would actually do something. Meanwhile, Susan had gotten through to her manager, who'd escalated immediately. Within 5 minutes, there were 3 different airline executives on conference calls, trying to figure out what the hell was happening on flight BA 347. And in the Lagos airport lounge, Chukwudi Okonkwo's phone buzzed with an alert. His daughter's flight had been delayed. Technical issues, the notification said. He frowned, pulling up the airline's app, checking the details. Then his phone rang. Private number. "Mr. Okonkwo?" A nervous voice. British accent. "This is David Patterson. I'm the station manager at Heathrow. There's been an incident involving your daughter." Chukwudi's blood went cold. "What kind of incident? Is she hurt?" "She's not hurt, sir, but there's been an altercation with a member of our cabin crew. I'm afraid the situation is rather serious and we need to put me on speaker and get me a video link to whoever's in charge of that aircraft. Right now." Back on the plane, Linda was starting to realize she might have fucked up. Her phone was ringing, her supervisor. She ignored it. Then it rang again. Then a third time. Martin stuck his head into the galley. "Linda, you need to answer that." "I'm busy." "Linda, that's the regional director. You really need to answer that." She picked up, her hand trembling. "Hello. Ms. Kowalski." The voice was ice cold. "This is Catherine Walsh, Regional Director of Flight Operations. Can you explain to me why an 8-year-old unaccompanied minor with a valid first-class ticket is currently sitting on the floor of your aircraft?" There was a seating issue." "There was no seating issue. There was a child with a confirmed seat, and you refused to allow her to use it. She doesn't belong in first class." "Based on what exactly? Her valid ticket? Her prepaid fare? Or something else, Ms. Kowalski?" The implication hung in the air like poison. I made a judgment call." The video from passengers' phones went viral. Millions of views. Linda's face everywhere. Her name became synonymous with racism and cruelty. She gave one interview, to a local news station, looking haggard and broken. "I don't know what I was thinking," she said, crying. "I saw this little black girl with a first-class ticket and I assumed something was wrong. That she didn't belong there. And I was so wrong. I humiliated a child. I traumatized her. And I did it because of my own prejudices, my own bitterness. There's no excuse. Do you have anything you'd like to say to Amara? The interviewer asked. Linda looked directly at the camera. Amara, if you ever see this, I'm so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved kindness and respect, and I gave you cruelty instead. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. What I did was unforgivable. 3 months later, Amara was thriving at her new school. She'd made friends, was excelling in her classes, and her teachers reported that she was brilliant and kind and curious. But she still had nightmares sometimes. Dreams where she was sitting on the floor while people walked past her, stepping over her like she wasn't there. Grace flew to Switzerland to visit, and one night, lying in bed together, Amara asked, "Mama, why do some people not like me because I'm black?" Grace's heart broke. But she answered honestly, age-appropriately, lovingly. Some people are afraid of things they don't understand. And instead of learning, they choose to be mean. But baby, that's their problem, not yours. You are beautiful and brilliant and worthy of respect. Always. The lady on the plane didn't think so. The lady on the plane was wrong. And she lost her job because she was wrong. Actions have consequences. I don't want her to be sad. Grace pulled her daughter close. You have the kindest heart. But sweetie, she should be sad. She hurt you. And sometimes people need to feel the consequences of their actions to understand how serious they are. I guess. You know what I think? What? I think you're going to grow up to be someone who changes the world. Someone who makes it better for kids like you. Amara thought about that. Maybe I'll make a rule that says everyone has to be nice on airplanes. Grace laughed, kissing her forehead. Maybe you will, baby. Maybe you will. 1 year later, Chukwudi Okonkwo stood at a podium at an airline industry conference, addressing hundreds of aviation executives. 1 year ago, my 8-year-old daughter was forced to sit on the floor of one of my own airline's aircraft, he began. Not because of overbooking. Not because of a technical issue. But because a flight attendant looked at her and decided she didn't belong in first class. That she wasn't worthy of the seat her father had paid for. The room was silent. That incident cost my airline millions in PR damage. It cost us customers. It cost us trust. But more importantly, it cost my daughter her sense of safety. And that is unacceptable. He clicked to the next slide. Today, I'm announcing the Amara Initiative, a comprehensive program that every airline under the Apex Global umbrella will implement immediately. Mandatory anti-bias training. Independent review boards for discrimination complaints. Zero-tolerance policies. And most importantly, consequences. Real consequences for staff who abuse their power. Another slide. We're also establishing a scholarship fund in my daughter's name for young people of color pursuing careers in aviation. Because the best way to change an industry is to change who's in it. The applause was thunderous. After the presentation, a journalist approached. Mr. Okonkwo, some people have criticized the amount of attention this incident received, saying it's only a story because your family is wealthy. How do you respond? Chukwudi's expression hardened. You're right. My daughter's story went viral because I had the power and resources to make it impossible to ignore. But here's what keeps me up at night. How many other children whose parents don't own airlines, have been treated like this and nobody cared? How many incidents like this happen every day to people who don't have the privilege of being heard? That's what the Amara Initiative is about. Making sure every passenger, regardless of their wealth, their race, their age, is treated with dignity. Because what happened to my daughter shouldn't require a billionaire father to be taken seriously. 5 years later, Amara was 13 now, confident and poised and still unfailingly kind. She was giving a speech at her school's assembly about her experience, turning her trauma into advocacy. I was 8 years old when a flight attendant made me sit on the floor, she said, her voice steady. And for a long time I was angry. Then I was sad. Then I was confused. But eventually I realized something. What happened to me wasn't about me. It was about a broken system that let people's biases go unchecked. She looked out at the audience of students, teachers, parents. My dad used his power to change that system. He created programs and policies that protect passengers. But the real change, the lasting change, comes from all of us deciding to be better, to question our assumptions, to treat everyone with respect, regardless of what they look like or how old they are or what seat they're sitting in. She smiled, a bit sad but mostly hopeful. I don't want to be known as the girl who sat on the floor. I want to be known as the girl who stood up, who used her voice to make things better. And I want all of you to know that you have that power too. You don't have to be a billionaire's daughter to demand dignity. You just have to be brave enough to speak up. The applause was deafening. After the assembly, a younger student, a little black girl, maybe 8 or 9, approached her shyly. Amara, she said, I wanted to say thank you. Because of what happened to you, and what your dad did, when I flew to visit my grandma last month, the flight attendants were really nice to me. And I didn't feel scared. Amara knelt down, eye level with the girl. What's your name? Zara. Zara, you never have to feel scared on a plane. Or anywhere else. You belong everywhere. Okay. Zara nodded, tears in her eyes, and hugged her. You made a judgment call to force a child to sit on the floor. A child whose father, I might add, is currently on a video call with our CEO, demanding to know why his daughter is being treated like garbage. Linda's legs gave out. She grabbed the galley counter. Her father? Her father. Chukwudi Okonkwo. Does that name mean anything to you? It should have. It absolutely should have. Because 6 months ago, Apex Global Airlines had been struggling. They'd needed a capital infusion. A buyer. Someone with deep pockets and a vision for the future. Chukwudi Okonkwo had provided that. He now owned 53% of the airline. He was, for all intents and purposes, Linda's boss's 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 boss. And she just forced his 8-year-old daughter to sit on the floor like a dog. Oh God, Linda whispered. Yes. Oh God. Now you're going to walk out of that galley, you're going to apologize to that child, you're going to seat her in her assigned seat with every courtesy we provide to first-class passengers, and then you're going to remain in the galley for the duration of the flight. When you land, security will escort you off the aircraft, and you'll be suspended pending investigation. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. And Ms. Kowalski? Start looking for a new job. Because you're done with this airline. The line went dead. Linda walked out of the galley on shaking legs. Every eye in first class was on her. Martin was still kneeling next to Amara, who was curled up small, her face hidden against her stuffed lion. Amara, Linda said, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Let's get you into your seat. Amara looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes so confused and hurt it made Linda want to die. I don't understand, Amara whispered. Why were you so mean to me? I didn't do anything bad. And Linda, bitter, resentful Linda who'd spent 27 years blaming the world for her problems, finally saw herself clearly. Saw what she'd become. Saw the fear in this child's eyes and knew she'd put it there. I know, she said, tears starting to form in her own eyes. I know you didn't. It's not your fault. It's mine. I'm so sorry. But sorry doesn't fix trauma. Sorry doesn't erase the moment when an 8-year-old learns that sometimes adults will be cruel for no reason at all. Sorry is just a word. Martin helped Amara up, gently brushing off her dress. Come on, sweetie. Let's get you settled in your real seat. The window seat. You can see the clouds from there. He walked her to 2A, helped her store her backpack, made sure her seatbelt was fastened. Another flight attendant, a kind woman named Sarah, brought her a warm cookie and a juice box. Is that lady going to be mean again? Amara asked quietly. No, honey, Martin said firmly. She's not going to bother you again. I promise. Why was she so mean? Martin didn't have a good answer. How do you explain racism to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that some people will hate them for no reason other than the color of their skin? Some people have bad days and make bad choices, he said finally. But that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect exactly as you are. Amara nodded, but she didn't look convinced. She pulled her stuffed lion close and stared out the window, quiet and small and heartbroken. The flight took off 40 minutes late. Linda spent the entire flight in the galley, not speaking, not eating, just sitting there with her head in her hands. Martin and Sarah took turns checking on Amara, bringing her snacks, asking if she needed anything. She was polite, always polite, but withdrawn. The bright, chatty little girl who'd boarded in Lagos was gone, replaced by someone quieter, sadder. When they landed in Zurich, two things happened simultaneously. First, airport security boarded and escorted Linda off the plane. She didn't fight, didn't argue, just walked off with her head down, her career over, her life in shambles. Second, a man in an expensive suit was waiting at the gate. He had Amara's photos, her documentation, and a direct phone line to Chukwudi Okonkwo. "Miss Okonkwo," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "I'm Thomas. I work for your father. I'm here to take you to school." Amara looked at him with those big, tired eyes. "Is my daddy mad at me?" "What? No, sweetheart, he's not mad at you. He's worried about you. He wanted me to tell you he loves you very much and he's sorry about what happened on the plane. It's not his fault. I know. But he wishes he could have been there to protect you." Amara's lip wobbled. "I want to talk to him." Thomas immediately handed her his phone. "He's waiting for your call." Amara pressed it to her ear. "Daddy." And Chukwudi Okonkwo, sitting in his Lagos office, felt his heart shatter at the smallness of her voice. "Baby girl. My brave girl. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. The nice man gave me cookies." "Heard. I'm so proud of you for being so brave." "Daddy, why did that lady hate me?" Chukwudi closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "She doesn't hate you, baby. She doesn't even know you. She hates herself, and sometimes when people hate themselves, they're mean to other people. But that's not about you. That's about her. I sat on the floor, Daddy, like a dog. I know. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. Are you mad?" "I'm mad at her." "Never you. You didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? Nothing. Okay. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I love you more than all the fish in the ocean," she replied, their ritual. "I'll see you in 2 weeks when I come to visit." "And Amara? That lady? She's never going to work for an airline again. What she did was wrong, and there are consequences for being cruel." Linda Kowalski's termination was finalized within 48 hours. The airline released a statement condemning her actions, announcing policy reviews, and issuing a public apology to the Okonkwo family. Present day. Linda Kowalski was 60 years old, working as a receptionist at a dentist's office, living in a small apartment, her life unrecognizable from what it had been. She'd never gotten another job in aviation. The viral video had made sure of that. But over the years, she'd tried to become a better person. She'd gone to therapy. She'd volunteered. She'd done the work of examining her biases and prejudices. One evening, she was scrolling through news articles and came across one about Amara Okonkwo's speech at the UN Youth Assembly. The girl was 15 now, speaking about equity in transportation, about dignity for all passengers, about how one incident had sparked industry-wide change. Linda watched the video of the speech, tears streaming down her face. Amara was poised, articulate, passionate. She spoke about her experience with honesty but without bitterness. She talked about turning pain into purpose. And Linda thought, I did that. I caused that pain. But she turned it into something beautiful. It didn't absolve her. It didn't make what she'd done okay. But it gave her something she'd been missing for years, hope that maybe, in some small way, her terrible mistake had led to something meaningful. She would never reach out to Amara. Never try to apologize again. The girl deserved to move forward without Linda's presence in her life. But Linda carried her every day. A reminder of the worst version of herself. And a commitment to never be that person again. The story of Amara Okonkwo is one about power and prejudice, about how cruelty can ripple outward in ways we never anticipate, and about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives become catalysts for change. It's about an 8-year-old girl who sat on the floor of an airplane and emerged determined to make sure no other child ever had to. It's about a father who used his wealth not for revenge, but for reform. It's about an industry that was forced to look at itself and acknowledge its failures. And it's about a woman who made a terrible choice and spent the rest of her life living with the consequences. 7 years after Linda Kowalski pointed at the floor and told a little girl to sit like a dog, airlines across the world had implemented the Amara initiative. Training programs. Accountability measures. Real consequences for discrimination. It wasn't perfect. Systems never are. But it was better. And somewhere in Switzerland, a 15-year-old girl with cornrows and her father's determination was planning her next speech, her next advocacy campaign, her next step toward changing the world. Because here's what Linda Kowalski taught Amara Okonkwo that day, even though she didn't mean to. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you respond. And Amara responded by refusing to be small. By standing up, even when they tried to push her down. By using her voice, even when they tried to silence her. By demanding better, even when they said she should be grateful for less. That's the real story. Not about a girl who sat on the floor, but about a girl who stood up and changed everything.